let's take a look at the Tax Policy Center's study of how our tax laws specifically impact people of color and encourage wealth and income inequalities between whites and people of color. And so what they did is they just used a simple 1040 form. And if you don't know what the 1040 is, it's the personal income tax return form that you file with the IRS every year. And there's all these different boxes. And obviously we don't have time to go through a 1040 and how each specific line impacts people of color. We're just going to focus on some of the larger ones. And the first one would be marital status. So generally speaking, people who file married filing jointly get a greater tax benefit than people married filing separately, generally better than people filing head of household, and generally better than people filing single. Now, I say generally because each person's circumstance is different, but marital statistics show that whites, in fact, with just over half of all white households were married, and we're going to compare that to 27% of Black households and 48% of Hispanic households. So being married, whether you're married filing jointly, married filing separately, or filing single or head of household, all those have an impact on how much money that you pay in taxes. And so since people of color historically are not married, and let me go back, it's not a cultural thing. A lot of people of color, the study found, were not married because they cited financial instability as a major reason for not getting married, right? So they're already financially unstable, and then they lose the tax benefit of being married, right? So that creates even more disparity. So let's move on from marital status. One of the things that I like to talk about is how do we build wealth in America, right? How do we uplift people out of poverty? And unfortunately, how most people build wealth in America, the first thing is through home ownership, right? And on your taxes, you get a huge deduction. The government actually subsidizes housing in America through tax deductions on your Schedule A. You get to itemize the amount of mortgage interest that you pay. And so for a lot of African Americans, they are not homeowners and they cannot take advantage of that. And that goes back to systemic racism and institutional racism, where people of color were not allowed to get loans. Banks weren't lending to them. And if they were lending to them, they saw them as a threat. They saw them as unable to pay back debts and would charge them a higher interest rate, right? Which led them to oftentimes defaulting on loans. So in order to understand how wealth is built in America and understanding that home ownership is one of the quickest ways to build wealth, and them not being able to take advantage of that on a tax return is very important. And it's one of those overt things that are not, you're not readily able to see unless you're examining it. Another one that has always brought to the forefront is capital gains and investments, right? So people can invest their money in the stock market. They can buy stocks, bonds, whatever, right? And that money is oftentimes taxed at a lower rate than people's wages, right? So we let people invest, right, in companies, right? And that money grows and they can they end up paying capital gains, right? Which starts at 15%. Where somebody who's hardworking, maybe they work a low income job, maybe they're, middle class job, they're being charged a higher tax rate because they worked and earned wages than someone that was passive, doing passive investments. Now, we can make all the arguments in the world that people investing in companies and in our economy raises everyone up. But I think we've seen time and time again, trickle down economics sometimes doesn't help those that are the most needy, right? And so that creates a problem when the quickest way to build wealth is investments, and again, retirement accounts, right? So a lot of people invest in retirement accounts, and that money grows tax-free until some people, take it out at retirement. Most people of color in their jobs don't have access to retirement savings that are typically offered through employers, right? So these are just more ways that Americans build wealth, and our tax code congratulates those people. Our tax code rewards those people by paying less taxes. And unfortunately, people of color are not able, a lot of times, to participate in those rewards and benefits because they do not have access to them.